Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Ben Callahan. I am the founder of Sparkbox and Redwood's design system community and one of the hosts here of The Question. I'm excited to welcome Laura Martinez as my co-host for episode 65. Laura, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Super excited to be here and the discussion that we had with design systems practitioners.
Yes, just yesterday, you and I finished co-hosting episode 65. It was a really fun conversation. People were amped up, excited, and we didn't even have to ask for participation. It's like we introduced the topic and hands started coming up and we got people in right away. So it was a lot of fun. Our topic was categorizing design systems. This is something that came up because you and I actually were having a conversation a week or two ago about just sort of like some of the things that we could discuss. And one of the things we realized is that we call systems different things, and many people inside the design system community call them different things. And so let me introduce this topic because I think it's one that a lot of folks are interested in. So again, we called it categorizing design systems. We gave a little context here, and we asked 4 questions of folks. We asked them, what word do you use to categorize your design system? And then, of course, why do you use that word? And then how does this language impact your organization's perception of the design system? And then how big is the organization where you currently work? And I think you had asked for that last question because you were looking for a little interesting correlation, like how can we connect this to the language to something else? And so we use that size as a connection point. We sent this out to over 1,000 folks. 1,011 people got that initial email with the question in it, and we got 70 responses. As always, wherever you're watching this, you can get a link to the FigJam file and also a link to the raw data. And so you can go and take a peek at the answers. They're anonymized, but you can see sort of how folks responded yourself. And if you do your own analysis, please share that back. Would love to see what you think and what you find. There were 2 questions that were a little bit more quantitative. The first was that very first question, what word do you use? And we gave folks 5 different options, and then the option to enter their own if they didn't see one that they liked. And so we gave them product, program, practice, infrastructure, service, and other. And as you know, it's funny. I think both of us were a little bit surprised at these results, Laura. They came back almost 50% of folks said product. So that's not what you were thinking, is it?
No, not at all. I was very surprised. I was hoping to see a little bit more of balance between program, service, even. And I'm a product person, so team product in this case. But it was very interesting to see how the system is perceived or the word that other design system practitioners are using.
Yeah, it's funny. 50% product, and then another about 25% were infrastructure. That one really surprised me. I know that there have been some really good articles written over the last year or so that are sort of encouraging that idea of infrastructure. Your system is infrastructure, that kind of thing. So maybe that's partly why folks are starting to lean in that direction. But I do think we're looking for something that crosses disciplines, and so infrastructure is one way to get at that. Those were interesting results for sure. When we did look at the organization size, we saw a pretty even distribution all the way up to 15,000, and then over 15,000 was about a third of the respondents. So we do have a lot of folks here who are from larger organizations. And we did a little correlation there, across every category of size. Product was the winner. Infrastructure came in higher in larger sized organizations, and then practice was much more common in the smaller organizations. And then the other 2, program and service, they only showed up in the larger organizations. So that was kind of an interesting point that none of the smaller orgs that were below, I think it was the break off there was like 5,000. So those folks below 5,000 didn't really come up with program or service too often. Right. So interesting way to kind of correlate things. We one of the things we decided that we could agree on, because there's a lot to disagree on here, but one of the things that we could agree on is that a design system is not a project. Are you still feeling that way after having gone through this?
Yes, and I'm excited to see that people agree with this because a design system is not something that has a set beginning and end date. And that's normally a main characteristic of what a project is considered, at least in the tech world. So it's really nice to see that we see design systems as evolving things that require continuous support and investment.
I do think when I first got started in the space, this was not an uncommon perception that folks had. You know, a lot of people came in and they just thought of them as projects. So it's interesting to see that either the systems they're working on have matured beyond that, or the perception that we have as an industry has grown. Talk to me a little bit, Laura, about your perspective on this before we did this call. Like what coming into the conversation, coming into this episode, just give me sort of your background and like what had formed your ideas around how you categorize systems.
Yes, in my previous job, I was a product manager responsible for our design system. And I was responsible for making sure that I had a very good understanding of the problems that my users had, internal users of the system, and how that translated into them being more efficient to solve problems for our end customers. So that meant that I had to exercise a lot of empathy with those type of users, that I was also responsible for a roadmap, for prioritization, for goal setting, for metrics tracking, and all of that are characteristics of what a product manager does and what is expected from a product. So because of that, I was curious to see if other people had a similar understanding of their system, considering that the product manager role is not as common in design systems.
So you came in with a lot of product experience, and maybe that background sort of informs your perspective on this. You know,
Yeah.
I think I came in thinking a little differently about it. You know, I'm sort of in the program camp, and the reason I think that I've settled on that is that with the organizations that we work with at Sparkbox and that I do some coaching and consulting with, I've seen that the product framing, which I also like, but I like the product framing because it gives consistent expectations around team sizes and roles, and all the roles that you need to deliver product are definitely roles that you need on a system team, right? So like I like it for that reason. But it also comes with some expectations around speed and innovation that I think are not quite right for a system. And so, and there's things that I think are beyond the product scope that a system needs to address. Things like education and communication and support. Well, support is a product thing, but most product teams don't have support. You know, there's like a separate part of the org that does that. So I see it as like a program where you're overseeing many interconnected roles and responsibilities. And part of that is the product part of the system. Part of it is other stuff too. And so that's why I like the word program. It's fun to come together with that healthy friction, right? Like you came in with sort of a strong belief. I came in with a strong belief. And I definitely heard a lot of things in this conversation that kind of helped me broaden my perspective, and I'm assuming that you did as well. Yeah. Can you think of anything that sort of challenged your thinking in this conversation?
I really like that aspect of design systems being treated as products, that there might be a conflict with the concepts of speed and agility and faster release cycles, because yes, a design system can have fast release cycles, but that can be counterintuitive or counterproductive, because there's a lot of work behind it, and stability is paramount when you're working in design systems. You need to make sure that the uptime of the system is 99% all the time, because otherwise the end products will suffer. Your product teams get blocked. They cannot deliver as fast. So I think that's something that I'm going to start to adopt, and is the fact that, yes, design systems are products, but they are also infrastructure, or they are a specific type of product that requires more stability over innovation and faster cycles.
So you're thinking of sort of like maybe combining a couple of these terms, which I think makes a lot of sense. And it's funny because when we got into this, one of the first comments that came to the surface was this idea. I think right away, Taylor was like, why do we have to pick one? Taylor coming in with a hot take always. And Guy responded to that saying, I reject the idea that we need to choose one. And Guy kind of had this perspective that was really interesting at the beginning. He said, if I'm talking with my manager, like we manage the system as a product, which is very aligned with what I hear you saying, Laura. He said, if we're looking for money, then I'm going to talk about it as a program, something that's bigger, that spans multiple products or spans multiple concerns, right? Because I need a good sized budget to do this work. And then if I'm talking to my engineers or ICs, we talk about it as infrastructure because it is cross-cutting, and it's supporting, like you're saying, it's foundational to the other work that we're doing. So Guy was sort of suggesting we have to look at the context of who we're talking to at every given moment. And change our language based on that, Does that resonate with you? Is that kind of the direction you're thinking you would move in then?
Yes, yes. And in fact, this opinion is very consistent with what we do in design systems. Because we have so many different types of users, our message needs to be tailored to make sure that we are addressing the needs of those users. So when you do talk to someone who is in design, they care more about coherence or consistency. But when you talk with someone in engineering, they care more about efficiency and faster delivery. And this is something that we need to adapt to or do on a daily basis. So sort of changing the language that we use to refer to our system, it also makes sense. I like what Guy also mentioned is the idea about branding and how that sort of helps navigate the need to define the system as something. And just by using the brand, that helps communicating to your users that there's something that they can use that addresses their specific needs without being categorized into something.
Yeah. I remember in the deep dive after we sort of had this conversation about changing our language based on who we're talking to, you had a really good question, which was, does that create confusion? If I'm calling a system in one conversation a program, in another one a product, in another one infrastructure, like, are people going to be like, what the heck, which one is it? Pick one, And Guy's response was, no, not that, because we have it branded. And so it is in his case, Saffron, whatever the name of your system is, but it's the Saffron program or the Saffron service or the Saffron infrastructure. So I do think that's nice, having a real brand. And I think I've seen a lot of teams moving away from branding their systems and calling them something that is completely obvious, like name of company, design system, And I don't disagree with that, but this is like an interesting idea that I think it gives some weight to the idea of branding. If you're going to use this sort of multiple category approach in your conversations, to have a brand to lean on, I think for that consistency could be good. So another thing that came up in the conversation I thought was really interesting was this idea that perhaps as systems mature, the words that we use to categorize them changes, right? And I know I've heard Dan Mall talk about this idea of when a system starts early in its maturity, it's a project, and as it matures, it becomes a product, and then eventually it becomes a practice. I think those are the words that I think I've heard him use, and I do think a lot of folks sort of started to kind of resonate with that too. Is that something that you're thinking about too as you move forward in your consultancy, like using that approach?
Yes, yes. I've seen that evolution as well, although the last part tends to change between infrastructure and practice. And
Yeah.
again, it depends on the organization, it depends on the industry, but it's interesting to see how there's some sort of correlation between the maturity of the system internally for each one of these organizations and the term that they choose to use to showcase the value, to showcase the support that they need from stakeholders even.
Yeah, and this kind of leads us into, like a whole other conversation, which is sort of, it felt a little bit like as we got into this, we kind of unpacked a lot of the nuance of specific answers and what specific folks do. I remember we had a conversation around, should it just be a system? Like, can we just call it a system? That led us down this path of like, okay, what a system means in one organization is different than what a system means in another. I think somebody said here in our company, if you use the word system, we have all these other systems that are already in place. And so it comes with this sort of, I don't know if baggage is the right word, but it comes with all this connotation, right? There's meaning attached to that word. And that's partly why I think we wanted to unpack this, like all of these words mean something in every organization. So there was a guy, I think, again, kind of came in with a nice concept at the end where he said, if I was going to do this over, if I was starting over and I hadn't done any work yet on the system here where I operate, I would come in first and look around the org and see what parts of the company are operating in the way that I want the system to operate. And then maybe I would lean on that language because that's a proven actual definition, and I think he said in his scenario that might shift his mind toward program because they have a strong accessibility program. And he's like, that's nice because that crosses disciplines. It gets funding. It's consistent. It's valued. There's leadership support. There's IC support. And you had done some nice concepts over here, these little sketches in the Fig Jam around sort of the strategy of naming. I thought maybe you could walk us through some of this.
Yeah, this is something that I put together when I was going through the answers. And I noticed a few patterns. So if you're looking to secure funding and budget to staff a team properly, maybe refer to your design system as product because there is a direct relation with a return on the investment. We also talked about how design systems have an impact on revenue. It's just that it's a little trickier to prove, but it's there.
I love this one. I love this point, and especially on the team size. When I look across the different orgs that we've worked with, the way they structure their product teams is different. And, every org does that a little bit differently. And so looking at that model for team structure, especially, I think is really important because it gives you the ability to say, look, we have designers doing this on the product side. We need those folks doing this on the system side. We have engineers doing this. We have QA doing this. We have, we have a product owner, right? We have all these roles that we know are needed in the product space. We need all of that here on the system space too. So it's a nice parallel for that for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Because product teams have a product owner, a scrum master, engineers, designers, and all of those roles are important when we are building foundational products like a design system. So yeah, using this terminology might help people secure that staffing that they are looking for. I love this one because of setting expectations around speed and stability, which are very important in design systems. And if that's the case, if you've gotten to a point in which you need to highlight the fact that your design system requires to be more stable rather than innovative, then use infrastructure because it also implies that it's non-negotiable, that it requires constant funding and constant support to deliver on its promises.
Yeah, this is so key. And I do think we had some conversation around infrastructure. Some of the folks felt like that was too technical of a term for everything that a system does. We did have some sort of challenges to that too, to say like, well, there's different roles now in systems. We have design ops, which feels like a technical role on the design. Like, how do I engineer the delivery of tokens, perhaps might be something that a design ops person would do, getting in and understanding the detailed structure of a design tool like Penpot or Figma and how those files work together and how I pull them in and how we do updates and deprecation and all of those kinds of things that are maybe traditionally engineering concerns. Now we have to think about on the design side too. And so infrastructure to me feels like it's aligned with some of that sort of newer work on the design side. Does that feel right to you too?
Yes, because even though we have design and system combined, there is a lot of technical work behind the work that we do. The design tokens architecture, there is a lot of engineering in defining how this is something that's going to be scalable, reusable. There is a lot of technicalities in the work that we do. So ensuring or maybe using infrastructure to refer to what we do is the right way to go to even to uplift the practice.
Yeah. And I think you're spot on talking about speed here too, because, like this gets at the pace layers conversation, or shearing layers, this idea that like parts of the org that are lower, they move at slower paces because there are things above them that are dependent on them. And so we don't want to change them rapidly, until we understand the implications of those changes. So yeah, a lot of benefit to this one. Oh, and the next one was project. So I'll let you say this one.
Yes. So is it a project? Nope. It definitely is not. It's very exciting to see that we agree that it's something that requires continuous investment. And yeah.
And then I kind of added one in for you. So I like your structure here. And I said, hey, if you feel like you're managing many layers or streams of work, then maybe program, because that implies the communication side of things, the cadence, the big vision, interconnectedness, interdependency, those sorts of things, which I think are, in my mind, that's the real work of systems, folks, is connecting things, right?
Yeah.
So I like it for that reason. But nice little framing. Thank you for kind of bringing that to us. And then you had one other diagram. Do you want to walk us through this real quick?
Yes. So I was doing some research on the different types of products that we have in tech. And in my previous organization, I was assigned to a designs operations team, and it was floating around. And then it eventually landed on another group that was called platform. And when I started talking to other product managers who were in charge of data platforms, cloud platforms, employee experience, I thought, wait a moment, there's a lot of similarities here. There are a lot of things that I'm doing that are platform related, but I didn't know were called like that. So I wanted to highlight here the difference between a consumer facing product versus a platform or B2B product, something that is more internal, something that is more around allowing people ship things faster and more efficiently. And something that is very important to highlight here is that on the B2C side, it is acceptable to move very fast and break things, but on the B2D side or platform side, stability is very, very important. Reliability, it's sometimes greater than innovation. And an important caveat here, I don't want to say that design systems can't innovate internally and break things and experiment. It's just that it needs to be more of a conscious decision. And you need to take into account more variables to make sure that the system remains stable and reliable.
A lot of teams, I think, are experimenting with layers that exist outside of the core of the system for that innovation and experimentation to happen. So yeah, this is such a smart way to think about it. I appreciate you doing all that research leading up to the conversation. Thanks for bringing these ideas. So I kind of came in, I think, pretty strongly in the program camp, and I'm trying to think. The thing I think that I pulled away from this is not every organization has the same definition of program. So in my work, I think what I'll do is a little bit more what I heard guys suggesting towards the end, which is like, look around a little bit, like listen, see what's working in the org, see what these words mean. And we may see that there's other words that we haven't even listed here that people haven't even brought to this conversation, right? That are relevant in specific orgs. So I think it's nice to come into these deep dives, just like thinking a little bit about, like, I don't want to come in too set in my ways, So I appreciate you bringing this. Is there I think I heard you mention just a bit of a change in the way that you're approaching things, but give me that sort of clearly state for me, like what's new for you after having gone through this episode.
Yes, new is that it depends. And we need to, or my invitation would be to ask people to be curious and exercise empathy internally within their organizations. Ask questions, look for examples about how other internal products or internal systems are being treated or perceived by stakeholders, by internal users as well. Learn from that. See what you can bring into your design system and promote it as whatever feels more comfortable or more useful to the organization as it is.
Yeah, I love that. And I really do appreciate you coming to this with that same sort of like learning mode perspective, like coming in. It's easy to come in if you've done a lot of this work and think you have the answers, but we do have a strong group of folks who participate who are just really curious, like you said. So it's really cool to see that. If you missed the episode, please know that there's more coming in 2026. We have a ton of stuff planned already, and I'm really excited. I should have said this at the beginning, but we won this year the Best Design System podcast in the Zero Height Design System Awards. So that's really fun. Very, very excited about that. And I definitely think of this as a win for the community. It's really not about any individual. I've had so many co-hosts over the year, and it's just been an absolute blast. I have learned so much from every single one of these. So it's a bit selfish, the reason that I do it. I get a chance to talk to so many smart folks like you, Laura, and people are so gracious with their knowledge and their experience. So thank you for helping us wrap up 2025, Laura. It's been an absolute blast.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye-bye.